Hello and welcome to Glasgow Loves EU. Tonight we're speaking to Elena Remigi, the founder of the In Limbo Project. The In Limbo Project is a not-for-profit project launched in the aftermath of the 2016 UK Brexit referendum to give a voice to the 3.6 million EU citizens living in the UK and the 2.2 million UK citizens living in the rest of the EU. The project has resulted in the publication of two books containing testimonies of all the affected citizens. And this evening we'll have Bernd helping us out on IT, and we'll have Inga who will be taking your questions on social media. So hello, Elena, thanks for joining us.
Good evening, lovely to see you.
Okay, and so first of all, just to get started, how did you start the In Limbo project and what motivated you to start this type of work?
Yes, as you said in your introduction, I started the In Limbo Project in the aftermath of the 2016 referendum to leave the EU. When I realized that most EU citizens hadn't had a voice because we weren't allowed a vote, except for those who had citizenship, as I was saying, we couldn't vote. So I felt that it would have been important to put together the numerous voices who were leaving maybe comments on social media under articles, and sometimes these voices were getting drowned by many other comments. And I thought if we could bring all these voices together, they could become a much stronger collective voice, and we could make our voices heard, speaking in the first person rather than being quoted in articles and everything. And also I felt that at the beginning, politicians and the public alike weren't really aware of what was happening, how we felt about having our lives left in limbo. Because fundamentally, after the referendum to leave the EU, our rights were left in limbo. We're no longer guaranteed. So that's when the idea started. And that's how I was motivated, by seeing all these voices, as I was saying, just being dispersed here and there. And the idea of a book also for me was important, because a book remains as a record, and I really wanted these voices to remain, for future generations as well, to learn, and to understand what went through, and how from one day to the other, we fell into this deep limbo, and and our rights were shattered overnight. So what I did, I started a Facebook group. The first night we were only a few people. It was me, the other co-editor of the book, Veronique, Cozy, and a few other friends. And after a month we were 1,000, and then the group kept growing. What we wanted to achieve was also to have a place that was a sort of safe place where people could leave their testimonies without fearing of being judged. Or maybe finding a xenophobic comment underneath. So just a sort of safe haven for EU citizens. The other thing I felt, as I was saying, was important, was to give a voice to EU citizens, because I felt that the human cost of Brexit hadn't been really discussed in the media. I mean, of course, it was early days, but I felt that already, by not being able to vote and by having our rights not guaranteed, that there was a human cost in that. And I felt also that the referendum campaign really turned us into the other. There was a lot of othering. We became somehow the other, the enemy, the economic migrants that were weighing on structures. And so we wanted to offer a counter narrative to that, just to explain that fundamentally we were EU citizens living in this country, exercising our freedom of movement, but also we had contributed to this country with our many talents, and also we moved to this country in many cases for love. We really cared about Britain, and we wanted to be an integral part. So as I was saying, was redressing the balance a little bit, and showing what our feelings were, and the practical difficulties we had been encountering.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like an incredible success story. That's so interesting. And whose idea then was it to publish the book, and was it difficult to get volunteers?
No, I started with the idea of really wanting, the book to be published. I mean, I had in my mind this idea of a book, so I was quite determined to have that, to achieve that. And we found first a publisher, then we decided it was better to self-publish because we wanted. This is a not-for-profit. I'd like to stress that project. None of us gains any money from the sales. At the beginning, we had few royalties when we self-published. But now it's completely, I mean, we don't even have that. And with these royalties, what we've done is we've been able to reach more than 2,000 politicians on both sides of the channel. Of course, now there is, you asked me whether there is a third book. In fact, there isn't, but we have published a new edition of both books because things had moved on from 2017 and we needed a new chapter about settled status. So the new book has many more testimonies from people from Eastern European countries. At the beginning, we struggled to get these, and we have a whole new chapter on settled status and on practical difficulties. Again, the book is very much about feelings. It's not so much it doesn't want to be, a legal, presenting, legal cases, but it's how we felt. And that's why the chapter on settled status is called Unsettled Status, because that's how EU citizens have been feeling. We've asked them year after year how they felt, and we always produce the Wordle, and there will be one coming out soon. But I remember in 2017 they said betrayed. That was the most recurrent word. And then there was sad, disappointed, worried, angry. So every chapter is centered around a feeling. Although, of course, maybe a testimony is just not about sadness, it's sad and angry. But we tried to create a narrative arc and a crescendo in the book, starting from sad to the sort of easier feelings even for the British public to get, and then going to maybe the more difficult testimonies about this sense of betrayal we felt. And of course, at the end, there's always a chapter on hope, although it's very, very small, unfortunately.
I see. And so how did you appeal then to people to submit their testimonies to you?
We simply asked them, we created this group and we asked them to tell us their stories, and the stories started really pouring in. We were overwhelmed at the beginning, we didn't expect, but of course, maybe we filled a gap. There was a real need for people to really tell their stories, and often their story starts with before the referendum and after the referendum, because I think their lives really have been turned upside down by this event. And in many of them, there's also the desire to show that they had moved here for love. In some cases, they had married, they had made friends, they felt integrated. So they always showed their love and how their love somehow was crushed, And so this is really a constant. And another feeling is that of, the sort of lost sense of home and belonging. The leitmotif of the book is "Where's home now?" After we've been called queue jumpers by Theresa May, after Johnson has told us that we've overstayed our welcome, we consider this place our home for too long. So inevitably people then start asking themselves, who am I, in this country? So that really the sense of home and belonging, which, we've lost in many cases.
Right, that's really touching. It must have been very emotional collecting all those stories and listening to them.
It was incredible. I remember the first months, we fundamentally created a book in less than 2 months, it was crazy when I think about it. And Veronique and I were reading these testimonies and trying to edit them. And very lightly, we really only intervened where the English was unclear, but we really also wanted to leave the mistakes. We wanted people really to, we wanted to keep them as primary sources. So we really wanted, to leave any imperfection. They didn't need to be perfect. It was just the voice, without any filters. As I was saying, we intervened only when the English wasn't clear enough. But it was, incredibly. It was just this feeling, we felt overwhelmed by all these stories and the amount of them. And people, of course, have continued submitting, and we have now a website. If you ever interested in knowing more about our project, it's called InLimboProject.org, and there is a section where you can leave your testimony, which can be long or can be, we call them voices, that we tweet every day. But in the, we're talking tonight about EU citizens, but we also wanted to include British citizens living in the EU and also British in the UK. Both books contain, all these people. We didn't want, of course, each book focuses on a different group of people, but it was important to represent the human cost of Brexit from the point of view of many people. And even British people living in the UK have lost a lot. They've lost, their European citizenship. They've lost their freedom of movement. And you've had Debbie Williams here before, and we, collaborated, Brexit worked with us. And then, of course, we had other groups as well who participated, like Remain in Spain, Rift, and British in Europe, to the second book. So truly, when I look back, I think it's been a true pan-European endeavor. We really, really wanted to bring all these voices together and to speak of the human cost, of the human side of Brexit. I think the Remain campaign, that was one of the, in my opinion, the main mistakes. It didn't do enough to bring these voices out. And I think had we had more of the feelings I think people might have been more convinced than with, just using statistics and numbers. It's very important, the personal stories, that's what people want to hear. That's, people want to know how you are affected. And it brings you closer to people. I found that after we published the book, we've had testimonies from people who had voted for Brexit and who read the book, came back to us and said, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize. Of course, you may think it's late, but it's never too late, because we also need to educate the public on, themes such as migration, EU citizenship, and all of that. So I think that, we feel happy of every person we've been able to, in a way, to convince, what a terrible thing has been to leave the EU for, in terms of rights, but in terms also of all the pain it has brought.
Yeah, this incredible story of loss. I mean, it must have been just overwhelming. And just on a practical note, then what kind of problems are EU citizens experiencing, say, for example, with settled status, that kind of thing?
Well, plenty of problems, unfortunately. I think there is a big difference between EU citizens of working age, with a good job, maybe, who are tech savvy. These, when they have applied for settled status, are the ones who found fewer difficulties. I'm not saying that it's been plain sailing, for, all of them, but, fundamentally, yes, because you had the documents to prove that you had been living here for 5 years. It's a different story when it comes to the elderly, comes to vulnerable people, for instance, victims of domestic abuse, people suffering from illness, whether it's mental or physical. It's all much more difficult. And some people really struggle to find the documents to prove, that they have been living here for 5 years. Many of these people, when I think, for instance, of victims of domestic abuse, they've ended up with pre-settled status, even though maybe they had been living here for long. And one may think, well, it's fine, soon they will get settled status, but people often forget that they'll, after 5 years, they'll have to do a new application for settled status. So fundamentally, with pre-settled status, it's not that you have a great status, because you have to wait for that deadline and remember to apply, and then wait for another answer, because this is not a registration, it's an application. You're asking whether you can stay. Some other people have received pre-settled status even though they have been working for many years in the country. We have a testimony of a chef in Bath, a very renowned chef. He received pre-settled status, but of course he appealed for it. He actually went to the media straight away because he was very angry, and because he's well known, straight away the Home Office intervened and rectified. But how many people have received pre-settled status and didn't know they could, they could submit another application, they could appeal, or because they were afraid, they settled for whatever was given to them. Then there has been the problem with COVID. Many people in need of face-to-face meetings, as I was saying, particularly the elderly, haven't been able to have these meetings. Embassies have been closed, so many haven't had the time to renew their passport, their identity card, etc. So it's been very complicated, and that's why we have always maintained that the deadline needed to be moved. People need more time. And yes, the Home Office said that now we can do paper applications, in case, if a person hasn't had the passport renewed yet, they can do that, but, it takes longer. And often the certificate of application is not sent straight away. So if the person does not receive within the 30th of June any confirmation of that they got settled status, and they don't have a certificate of application, which you get when you do your online application, how they're going to prove it's going to be very complicated, to prove that you have the right to stay. And let's not forget that we have, as I was saying before and after. I mean, there are those who came before the 31st and those who will come afterwards. And how we're going to be able to distinguish between these two groups, it's going to be interesting, and I say it, of course, in an ironic way, but it's rather tragic. So we're all, concerned about what will happen. So this is just to give you a couple of examples that come on top of my head, but I could go on and elaborate for long on all the the issues with settled status and pre-settled status.
Yeah, I can imagine it being very frustrating. We'll just go to social media now to see if there's any questions coming in from the audience.
Hi there, hello. I haven't got any questions directly from the audience yet, but I was going to ask a question myself, if I may.
Of course.
Sure. And so I was very shocked to read in the news today, actually, about the huge amount of EU citizens who haven't applied for settled status yet. I think the number was close to 130,000. And, these are people who might be losing access to very fundamental services like healthcare, jobs, and homes. So, as an EU citizen myself, I was wondering if you are aware of that, and how, what you are doing to reach these people and ensure that they will be able to apply and access the services that they need.
Yes, I read the news as well. 130,000 people who are going to be, risk becoming unlawful residents. It's not just a case of losing the right to the NHS, or, etc. When you become illegal, fundamentally, you're left with nothing but, leaving the country. Of course, now the Home Office is saying that they're going to be generous. What that generosity, entails, we're not quite sure. If people do submit late applications, but again, we don't have the details. But these people are at real risk. Now, in terms of reaching them, with In Limbo, we have, many of our members who work locally, work with charities, work for Settled, Citizens Advice Bureau. So they are the ones who on the territory, they help people. Sometimes it's the other way around. We, for instance, this week I've had my emails, lots of emails from really concerned EU citizens with complicated situations. And so we normally, what we do is we don't give any legal advice, but we refer them to any group that we think might help them, as I was saying, settled or citizens advice, etc. So we try to spread them amongst groups, and if there's a real, I remember this week there has been a Belgian person who's approached me with a very complicated story, and therefore what I do is I just contact directly the people I know who work for these charities or these groups, and speak to them directly, and and make sure that the person is looked after. But I think I've been told in these days the lines are overwhelmed. They're so full of people asking, and it's often the not so straightforward cases. So it's a bit concerning, because we need to try and make sure that nobody remains left out.
We do actually have a comment here on the Facebook chat saying that there's no availability on the phone line, and there's such a backlog at the Home Office, which makes things really hairy for many people. And there's a question now from Peter Burke, who says, I wonder about the question of written proof of status. Why are the governments so pig-headed about this? Is it just bloody-mindedness, or are they trying to distract us from campaigning on more fundamental issues?
You're saying, why don't we have physical proof of status? Is that
yes.
what you say? Yeah. Well, that's a good question. That's what we've been together with the 3 million who do the lobbying side. We've been always supporting the physical proof of status. I know they've now submitted the idea of a sort of QR code, a safe one that people could use, could print. Like they do for vaccine, the digital, I can't remember the exact name now, but you have a digital passport, and something like that EU citizens could be able to print out would enormously help, because imagine an elderly person having to have the internet working, generate a code, that you need to, use the code and send it to, for instance, the NHS, and it's complicated. In some cases, the government server has been down, and if you need, that, and it doesn't work, is not good news. And as I was saying, for instance, people like visually impaired, there are lots of categories who would enormously benefit from having physical proof of status. And other people could have it on their phone, and they could just show it, rather than having all this very laborious system, which can create a lot of issues. So I'm totally in favor, and we've been campaigning and supporting, and actually, this is not what we do as InLimbo, but the 3 million have asked whether people want to write to their MP and push for this printable secure code. So I really encourage people to do it. I think it's extremely important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't sound like an easy process by any means.
No. Yeah. People imagine, it's like maybe something that you show on your mobile, but it isn't like that. And I've had a person this week writing in the group and she's much younger than me. She knows, certainly she uses technology very well. And she said, I tried to generate a code 3 times, and 3 times the code didn't work. I don't know whether it's just bad luck. But even in that case, I mean, it's not a question of luck or bad luck. You are left with something which leaves you, unsettled, as more than settled. That's the idea of settled status, but it doesn't feel like that.
Mm-hmm. And in your experience, have you heard of any EU citizens that maybe just have kind of given up on the struggle with all the paperwork and just decided to leave? And do you think that's why the UK is experiencing labour shortages in many sectors?
I think, a lot of people, we've heard of so many people, we've had so many people who left, even people who left the testimonies in the group, in the book, sorry, many of them have left. So we've had lots of academics, scientists who left, or who tell me they have a plan B, because they feel that having left the EU, they will struggle to have access to EU grants, and struggle, I mean, they'll no longer be able to, and they prefer to work in a European environment. We've had, but lots of families have left, entire families, and they've left their testimonies. We could write a third book of Brexiters. And business are in fact struggling because of the lack of people, waiters, of cleaners, of people in hospitality. We know, of course, of people working in the field now. Many of them have left with the pandemic. I was reading on The Guardian that there's a shortage of drivers, so we might struggle with chilled food this summer. Not that we, luckily now it's not so hot, but it might become. But and we have a shortage in packaging in warehouses. I feel that with the pandemic, with COVID, we are seeing only the surface of the issue. But I think that when we return to normality, I fear that so many would have left by then, that it will be really, really difficult. I feel that this government has done everything possible to make this place less attractive, and to newcomers, but even to people who lived here, that at one point said, well, what's the point, and if I'm really not wanted, if I'm not valued, if I'm not appreciated, why staying? I think in Scotland you probably have a slightly different situation. We notice that from the testimonies we receive, also because you have a First Minister who has, and other politicians who've said, you're welcome, you're our neighbours, our friends, and this is a very important message. I hear a lot of EU citizens say, I would like to move to Scotland. So I've never been to Scotland, unfortunately, but I'm sure it's a slightly different situation from the one we live here in England. So yes, but Brexiters is very real, and it's really tragic. I think there will be so much talent lost because people were coming here, maybe working in a coffee shop, but with plenty of ideas, with wanting to do something different. So they brought their talents, and all of that will be gone when you need an expensive visa. You restrict so much immigration.
Yeah, well, you absolutely would be welcome in Scotland anytime, obviously. But that leads me on then to my next question. Do you think that there are regional differences in terms of like the sense of belonging in the UK, or has there been a change in that sense?
Yes, I don't like to, to say that, just to name places in the country which, have been more hostile and everything, also because, I might be, in a way, it would not be fair to a lot of people who are really supportive to us. But let's say, generally speaking, the areas which have voted massively, to leave the EU, where you have the hardest Brexiters, have been the hardest ones for EU citizens to live in. And some of them really have told us that they especially at the beginning, they're really struggling going out, speaking in their own mother tongue, and so there have been areas which have been for sure harder to live in than others. Scotland is not one of them, as we hear. But even in Northern Ireland, we've had people saying, just before Brexit, even Northern Ireland voted to remain. I mean, now the situation in India is slightly changed, but people were saying that they felt much more welcome than in other areas. I think it's very much more of an English problem, but again, I don't want to say that, there's been a massive support from a lot of English people. And even the other day, we've had an Italian lady who's been sent through her letterbox a horrible letter. It was sent to her and to her neighbors, Romanian, saying, go back home, etc. The usual things that, that you hear. And there has been such a massive response from British, but I would say English people who said, I'm so ashamed. This is not, who we are. And, this is just really some people, and don't think, we're all like that. We support you. So she said she was overwhelmed. And we had also many Britons in Europe, Brexit sent us all the letters, the messages of support to Nicoletta, who was really pleased to receive them. So, that's why I always like to say that, we can't just look with just saying, this area is full of xenophobia. Xenophobia and racism have always existed, and it's not only Britain. But of course, I think that the Brexit vote has, in a way, validated some behaviours, has normalised a certain way of, expressing yourself, which maybe before the referendum was kept a bit quieter. People did not dare so much, and now they do. So, yes.
Right. Well, that's nice to hear then that people rallied around her. I mean, that's heartwarming. We'll just go to social media now, see if there's any more questions.
Hey, nothing else really, but we've had a lot of comments. Debbie Williams is saying how feelings of home, belonging, and identity have all been challenged by the Brexit vote, and how disgusting it is to have to apply to stay in your own home. Also, yeah, a great idea from Kat Newman, who said, maybe there should be something like an ID card or a paper for people with settlement status, because the whole idea that you can only print out the PDF is ridiculous. So
Yes.
there's a lot of discussion going on, definitely, and very supportive. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's obviously a really interesting topic, obviously. And so we've heard a lot of warnings then that, people are saying that the EU settlement scheme will lead to the next Windrush. Do you kind of lead any credence to that?
Yes, we've seen it coming. We've seen it from the beginning. At the beginning, we were told we were, exaggerating. Nothing would have happened. We will all be fine. But the foundations were there, and we are following the same trajectory of, the Windrush people. When you start removing rights retrospectively, and then, you give them back in some shape or form, but not completely. And, you introduce a scheme where, if you don't apply, then you're left illegal fundamentally, and you have to leave the country. Things are bound to happen. I mean, sometimes people think of EU citizens as all of, young and fit to work. But there are people who have been here for ages, and sometimes, like in the last emails I've received, many are the children of immigrants or EU citizens who came to the UK many years ago, and they didn't realize they had to apply as well. They felt British. Many people feel safe, and they don't think of the risk of not applying. We've noticed the same with many children. Many people don't seem to understand that the children need to apply. They need to apply for the children as well. And all these people, that's how Windrush was created. People didn't have the right documents. They were left undocumented. And so, it's, I agree when Yvette Cooper said, it's going to be a Windrush on steroids, because we said 3 million, but we discovered we are far more. We are 5 million and more. So how many will be left out? It's really scary to think about that. So we have every reason to believe that unless something changes, we are really heading towards that.
Wow, that's quite shocking to hear. Um, Almost out of time. We'll try and squeeze one or two more questions in if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
I was just wondering, like, when you were compiling all your testimonies, is there any particular ones that stood out to you or affected you?
There's so many. I think when it comes to feelings, I think the Roelof from the Netherlands wrote a testimony which started with, "From today, I'm a piece of bargaining fodder." And not, I can't really remember, but it spoke about the sense of home and belonging which was lost. And another said, "I, citizens of Europe, my wings clipped, the result of a mad referendum in which I had no voice." And some actually are even quite poetic. And I also remember Saskia, always from the Netherlands, who wrote a poem about, we don't mean you, because that was a typical sentence we heard, from people saying, "Oh, I voted, leave, but, we didn't mean you, it wasn't against you, it wasn't about immigration. And what was it about? And it was never about us, like the person. It was about other immigrants, all those, maybe you come from Eastern European countries, or or the Poles. We know that these are the groups who have been targeted the most, and even that needs to be said. Not all Europeans have been treated the same. And I think what happened to Poles and to Eastern European is really quite a shameful chapter, because think of the Poles as well, of the contribution they brought to this country. But in general, people are people, and they have a dignity, and this targeting them for their provenance, is completely wrong, and yeah, quite shameful.
Mhm. And so just, would you have any kind of final message this evening for any EU citizens who maybe don't have settled status or maybe worried about their future?
Well, first of all, a message to all those who are listening. If you know any EU citizen, any even descendant of EU citizens, anyone you could think, oh, maybe this person needs to apply, please, just inform them that they need to. And there's a hard deadline on the 30th of June. So, we really, really need to do this. If they need any help, you can send them to us. We normally then send them to the relevant organization that can give them practical help. But in our group, they can find friendship, they can find support. The other message I would like to leave is because, we published these two books, In Limbo and In Limbo 2, which I haven't still shown. You've probably seen them many times. Just buy them and read them, and let your friends know about this, because I think that many Britons still are unaware of what's happening. They read the headlines, they're told 5 million people have applied, we're all sorted, we're all fine. And that's the issue, and that's the risk of a new Windrush, that people assume we are fine when we're not. And things happen in silence. And this is why I think that the whole idea of In Limbo is to make our voices heard. Because when we speak up, when we let people know, no, we're not fine, and why, this is when, we remain on the spotlight, the media talk about us, and we hopefully can find a solution to our problems. It's when everything falls silent, that's the risk. And this is how the Windrush scandal happened. So I think this is fundamentally what I would like to leave with people tonight, and I would like to thank you for this opportunity, and for the people who've also asked me some questions.
Okay, no, thank you very much for coming. It's been really, really interesting. It's actually been quite emotional and touching, like talking to you and hearing all those stories.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and I think that the Brexit book, it needs to be written.
Yes, perhaps. At the moment, I think we have a lot on trying to make people understand that settled status is it will, as it is set up, will cause a lot of problems, and we're seeing it already. I don't want to open another chapter, but people have already struggled, to rent, to open mortgages, etc., etc. So it's already happening. it's not, it's not only what will happen in the future. That's, it's a bit scary. But, also I forgot to say, of course, everybody has to apply within the 30th of June. But if you find anyone after the 30th of June that hasn't applied, the Home Office said that there will be some degree of generosity, so-called. But, please, let them know that even late applications, will be accepted. Within reason, but the 30th is is the deadline. So it's important that they stick to that, and they stick to their certificate of the confirmation of that they've sent this application. And even if the result doesn't arrive, they can hold on to that document to show at least that they have applied.
Okay, excellent. That's good to know. Well, thank you so much. You've done absolutely incredible work, and it's been really, really interesting listening to you this evening.
Thank you very much. And thanks to everyone.